The family had always lived quietly in their suburban neighborhood. They were friendly but kept mostly to themselves, enjoying their weekends tending to the garden, fixing small things around the house, and taking their children to the nearby park. Life was calm and simple, the kind of life many people wished for, and they appreciated every peaceful moment. They never imagined that their ordinary life could be disrupted by a single neighbor. Karen moved in across the street one sunny morning. She was immediately noticeable, always dressed sharply, always moving with purpose, and always looking around as if judging everyone. At first, the family thought she was just a new neighbor trying to settle in. They smiled politely when they passed her on the sidewalk, waved when she waved, and tried to welcome her the best way they could. But it didn't take long for them to realize Karen wasn't just any neighbor. She had a strict, almost obsessive way of watching everyone around her, and soon she focused her attention on them. It started with small things. She would knock on the door to comment on minor details that no one else seemed to notice. One day she mentioned the bushes in the front yard looked slightly overgrown. Another time she said the mailbox was crooked and needed to be fixed. The family, though surprised, tried to respond politely. They trimmed the bushes, straightened the mailbox, and tried to smile while Karen nodded as if inspecting her work. They told themselves that maybe she just cared about appearances. Maybe she was the kind of neighbor who paid close attention to details. But slowly it became clear that Karen had a different plan. Karen began to scrutinize their HOA payments. She seemed to know exactly when the family paid their fees and when she thought they might be late. She would knock on their door and ask questions about payments, even though the family always paid on time. Sometimes she would leave notes claiming the family had missed a deadline or owed money they didn't. At first, the family was confused. They checked their records and made sure everything was correct, hoping Karen would realize her mistake and stop. But she didn't. Instead, her behavior grew more intense. The family tried reasoning with her. They showed her their receipts, explained when and how they made payments, and even suggested that they could meet with the HOA together to clear up any confusion. But Karen refused. She didn't want to hear explanations. She said they needed to learn a lesson and threatened to report them to the HOA and local authorities. The family was stunned. They could not understand why someone would go to such lengths over something as simple as HOA fees. It felt like Karen was trying to control them, and they had no idea why. At first, the family tried to ignore her, hoping she would calm down. They continued living their lives quietly, tending to the garden, playing with their children, and working on small projects around the house. But Karen's attacks didn't stop. She started sending formal letters to the HOA, claiming the family was hiding fees and breaking rules. She would attend HOA meetings and make dramatic speeches about their alleged violations. Some neighbors began to notice and whispered about the tension building between the family and Karen. The family felt the pressure, but they stayed calm, hoping reason and evidence would protect them. Karen didn't stop there. Her harassment became personal. She made comments to the children while they were playing outside, questioning their behavior and making unnecessary criticisms. She called the local school to complain about minor things, claiming the children were disruptive or poorly behaved. The family felt frustrated and stressed. They had never dealt with anything like this before, and it was starting to take a toll. They realized that Karen's obsession wasn't just about rules, it was about power, control, and intimidation. Late one night, after receiving yet another threatening letter, the father sat at the kitchen table looking at the pile of documents Karen had sent. He felt a mix of anger and determination. He had grown up in a disciplined environment, learning patience, strategy, and careful planning. He told his spouse that they couldn't respond with anger, that they needed to be calm, organized, and smart. They began gathering every piece of evidence: receipts for HOA payments, copies of letters, emails, and even photographs showing their property in perfect compliance with all rules. They knew they had to show Karen that her attempts to intimidate them would fail. While they were preparing, Karen continued her attacks, unaware that she was dealing with a family who had patience, experience, and a strong sense of justice. She tried to rally neighbors against them, hoping someone would support her claims. But the family's calm and composed nature began to speak louder than Karen's accusations. They didn't argue or fight. They simply prepared for the moment when truth and evidence would speak for them. The family's children noticed the tension at home. They were old enough to understand that something was wrong, but too young to grasp the details. The parents made sure to shield them from the worst of it, keeping life as normal as possible. They played in the yard, did homework at the kitchen table, and enjoyed weekend trips to the park, all while the storm of Karen's harassment brewed quietly in the background. Meanwhile, Karen's behavior became more public. At neighborhood gatherings, she would make pointed comments about the family, often in front of others, suggesting they were dishonest or irresponsible. Some neighbors began to avoid interaction with the family, uncertain about what to believe. Despite this, the family remained polite, never retaliating, and continued living their lives with integrity. One afternoon, the father decided it was time to take a proactive approach. He reviewed every piece of HOA documentation and organized it meticulously. Payment dates, receipts, letters, emails. Everything was sorted and ready to present if needed. He also took note of Karen's own minor violations, knowing that they might need to be addressed if she continued her attacks. The mother focused on keeping the children calm and reassured, maintaining a sense of normalcy in the household. As days turned into weeks, Karen's actions became increasingly aggressive. She continued writing letters, showing up uninvited, and trying to provoke responses. Yet the family stayed composed. They understood that reacting with anger or fear would only play into her hands. They were determined to let evidence and calm reasoning guide the outcome. They had no idea how far this battle would go, but they were ready to face it together, as a family. By the end of the first month, the tension had escalated to a point where everyone in the neighborhood seemed to be aware of the conflict. The family could feel eyes on them, some supportive, some curious, and some judgmental. Through it all, they maintained their routine. They mowed the lawn, fixed broken fences, baked for neighbors, and spent time with their children, refusing to let Karen's attacks disrupt their daily life. Deep down, they knew that this was more than just HOA fees. Karen had underestimated them. She had assumed they were ordinary residents, easy to intimidate. But the family had strength, patience, and experience that Karen could not see. They were not going to allow fear or anger to control their lives. They would face her calmly, with truth on their side, and protect their family at all costs. By the time the first part of this ordeal ended, the family had grown stronger. They were united in purpose, focused on gathering evidence and ready to confront Karen in a way that would leave no doubt about who was in the right. They still had much to endure, but they knew that no matter what happened, they would face it together, with courage, patience, and unwavering resolve. They were determined not just to survive Karen's attacks, but to emerge from the conflict with their dignity intact and their family bond stronger than ever. After the first month of Karen's constant scrutiny, the family realized that her harassment was not going to stop on its own. Her letters kept arriving, filled with accusations and demands that seemed to grow more absurd with each passing day. The mother carefully read each one, taking notes and filing them in the growing collection of evidence. The father stayed calm, reviewing the receipts and records of payments, making sure that every detail was correct and easy to present if needed. They both understood that the only way to handle Karen was with patience, clear proof, and steady resolve. Karen began showing up at the house more frequently, often standing at the edge of the yard, inspecting the property and sometimes even taking photos. The children noticed her presence and began feeling uneasy when they played outside. The family took extra care to protect them, encouraging them to stay close and not engage with Karen. They explained that some people could be difficult, but it was important to remain calm and respectful no matter what. One afternoon, Karen decided to make a public spectacle. She went to the local HOA office and demanded a meeting to discuss the family's supposed violations. The office staff listened politely, then asked her for evidence of the problem she claimed existed. Karen fumbled through her notes, unable to produce any concrete proof. Meanwhile, the family had already been in contact with the HOA and had organized their records meticulously. They knew that when the time came, they would have the facts to defend themselves. Karen's frustration grew. She realized that the family was not reacting with fear or anger. Her attempts to intimidate them were failing, and this only made her more determined to control the situation. She began spreading rumors in the neighborhood, suggesting that the family was dishonest or secretive. Some neighbors, unsure of the truth, started to watch the family more closely, curious about what might be happening. The father decided it was time to take action. He reviewed the HOA's rules and regulations in detail, understanding every clause that applied to his property. He noticed that some of Karen's own actions were questionable under the same rules. He made notes and gathered photographic evidence of minor violations, not to use aggressively, but to demonstrate that rules applied to everyone equally. The mother focused on keeping the children engaged in their usual routines, maintaining a sense of normalcy in the household despite the growing tension. One evening, the father and mother sat together at the kitchen table, discussing their next steps. They knew that a direct confrontation would eventually be necessary, but it needed to be handled strategically. They practiced calmly explaining their side of the story, backed by evidence and preparing for any false claims Karen might make. They also made a plan to involve the neighbors in a positive way, hoping to show that the family was committed to fairness and community rather than conflict. Karen's harassment became more personal. She started questioning the family's parenting, making comments when the children played outside or visited nearby parks. The father reminded the children that some people were difficult and that Karen's comments were not a reflection of their worth. The mother spent time reassuring them, emphasizing the importance of staying calm, kind, and focused on the truth. The family continued with their routines, gardening, cooking, and doing homework, determined not to let Karen's actions disrupt their lives. The tension in the neighborhood was noticeable. Neighbors whispered about the family, some supportive, some curious, and some skeptical because of Karen's rumors. The family remained consistent in their behavior, never responding with anger or aggression. They knew that their calm and respectful approach would eventually reveal the truth. They also understood that the most powerful response to false accusations was patience and evidence. Karen attempted to escalate the situation by attending community meetings and raising her concerns publicly. She presented her accusations with confidence, hoping to sway the HOA board and neighbors. The family, however, arrived fully prepared with organized records, clear documentation, and a calm demeanor. When it was their turn to speak, they presented every payment, letter, and piece of evidence in order. They explained each situation clearly, showing that they had been in full compliance with the rules. The board and neighbors listened, surprised by the thoroughness and clarity of the family's presentation. Karen's confident arguments began to falter as she realized she had no real proof to back up her claims. The family remained composed, answering questions respectfully and providing clear evidence for every point. It became evident to everyone in the room that Karen's accusations were unfounded and that the family had handled the situation with dignity and honesty. After the meeting, some neighbors approached the family, expressing apologies for any doubts or concerns they had previously entertained. They admitted that Karen's obsession had caused unnecessary tension and that the family had handled the situation remarkably well. The father and mother remained humble, grateful for the support, but focused on ensuring that the situation was fully resolved. Karen's frustration was palpable. She had underestimated the family's patience, intelligence, and strategic approach. She expected fear or confrontation, but the family's calm, evidence-based responses left her with no way to assert control. She began to retreat, realizing that her aggressive tactics were ineffective and only damaging her own credibility. The family, while relieved, continued to remain vigilant. They knew that Karen's behavior could flare up again, but they were prepared. They had developed a stronger bond, working together as a team, and had learned the importance of patience, careful planning, and calm communication in the face of harassment. They also made a conscious effort to maintain positive relationships with other neighbors, reinforcing their reputation as fair, respectful, and trustworthy members of the community. Through this challenging period, the family learned valuable lessons. They discovered the strength of their unity, the power of calm reasoning, and the importance of standing up for themselves with dignity and evidence. The children observed these lessons firsthand, learning how to respond to difficult situations with patience, clarity, and respect. Life gradually returned to a more normal rhythm, but the family remained aware of Karen's presence. They continued their routines, focusing on positive activities and maintained clear records of all interactions. They understood that their best defense was not confrontation, but preparedness, integrity, and a steady, calm approach. By the end of this period, the family had grown more confident. They were ready for any further challenges, knowing they could face them together. Karen had attempted to intimidate and control them over trivial matters, but the family's patience, strategy, and integrity had turned the situation around. They had learned that even in the face of harassment, calmness, evidence, and unity were the most powerful tools to protect themselves and their family life. The family had reached a point where patience, careful planning, and calm composure had become their daily routine. Karen's harassment had not stopped, but the family felt prepared. They knew that a decisive confrontation was approaching, and they wanted to handle it in a way that would leave no doubt about their integrity. Every payment, letter, and document had been reviewed, organized, and double-checked. They had a clear plan to present the truth and protect their family's reputation. The next HOA meeting was approaching, and tension was high. Karen had already announced her intention to attend, clearly expecting a dramatic confrontation. The family knew this was their opportunity to resolve the matter once and for all. They reviewed their presentation carefully, practicing how to speak calmly, clearly, and confidently. The father went over each payment, each letter, and each alleged violation, preparing for every possible question or claim Karen might raise. The mother focused on keeping the children calm and ready for any situation, explaining that sometimes adults had disagreements, but it was important to remain respectful and composed. On the day of the meeting, the family arrived early. Karen was already there, moving with her usual air of authority, confident that she would prove her point. Some neighbors were present as well, curious to see how the confrontation would unfold. The family felt a mix of nerves and determination. They knew that the outcome depended not on anger or confrontation, but on clear evidence and calm communication. When the meeting began, Karen stood and started her accusations. She spoke loudly and confidently, pointing to minor details she claimed were violations, alleging that the family had failed to pay fees on time, and suggesting that they had ignored community rules. The family listened quietly, taking notes and waiting for their turn. They did not interrupt or argue. They simply prepared to respond with facts. When it was their turn, the father spoke first. He calmly and clearly addressed each accusation, showing receipts and records for every payment. He explained each situation logically, pointing out errors in Karen's claims and demonstrating that the family had been in full compliance with all HOA rules. The mother followed, presenting letters and communications that confirmed their adherence to the rules and showing how Karen's complaints had been unfounded. Their presentation was thorough, respectful, and clear. The board members and neighbors listened carefully. Karen, who had expected fear or defensive behavior, began to show signs of frustration. Her arguments were easily countered with evidence. Each claim she made was refuted with clear documentation. The family remained calm, answering questions politely and providing clarification whenever needed. Their composed demeanor contrasted sharply with Karen's increasingly agitated behavior, and it became clear that her accusations were not supported by facts. Some neighbors began whispering to each other, realizing that Karen's obsession had caused unnecessary tension and that the family had handled the situation remarkably well. The board members took detailed notes, occasionally asking the family for clarification on specific points. Every time a question was raised, the family responded with calm, clear explanations, reinforcing their credibility. Karen, meanwhile, was struggling to maintain control of the situation. Her confidence had eroded as the truth became obvious to everyone in the room. The father then addressed Karen's behavior directly, carefully pointing out minor actions of hers that did not comply with HOA rules, such as planting prohibited flowers and having temporary structures that were not allowed. He did not accuse or attack her personally, but presented the facts to demonstrate that rules applied to everyone equally. The board members and neighbors nodded, recognizing that fairness and consistency were essential for the community. Karen's face turned red with anger, but she could not refute the evidence. Throughout the meeting, the children watched from a safe distance. They had seen the family handle difficult situations before, but this was a real-life lesson in courage, patience, and strategic thinking. They understood that staying calm and using evidence to support the truth could overcome even the most aggressive behavior. The family's response was measured, respectful, and dignified, leaving a strong impression on everyone present. As the meeting drew to a close, the board made a formal statement. They confirmed that the family was fully compliant with all HOA rules and payments. They also noted that Karen's accusations were unfounded and warned her against further harassment. The family felt relief but also a sense of quiet satisfaction. They had faced intimidation with patience, integrity, and careful planning, and the result had clearly demonstrated their credibility. After the meeting, several neighbors approached the family privately. Some apologized for doubting them, explaining that Karen's behavior had caused confusion and tension in the community. Others thanked them for handling the situation so respectfully, setting a positive example for the neighborhood. The family accepted the support with gratitude, but they remained focused on ensuring that life returned to normal. Karen, humiliated and frustrated, left the meeting without speaking to anyone. She had underestimated the family's ability to remain calm, organized, and prepared. Her aggressive tactics had failed, and her credibility had been damaged in the eyes of the board and neighbors. The family, however, continued to act with grace and dignity, refusing to gloat or seek revenge. They understood that true strength lay in composure and truth, not in confrontation or aggression. In the days following the meeting, the family focused on restoring normalcy to their lives. They continued their usual routines, tending to the garden, preparing meals, and spending time with their children. The tension in the neighborhood gradually eased as others recognized that the family had acted with integrity and patience. Karen's influence diminished, and the community began to view her behavior as an outlier rather than the standard. The family also took time to reflect on the experience. They discussed the lessons they had learned about patience, preparation, and standing up for oneself in a calm and respectful manner. They recognized the importance of unity and communication within the family, and they were proud of the way they had handled a challenging and stressful situation. The children in particular absorbed these lessons, learning how to navigate difficult situations with clarity and composure. As life settled back into routine, the family remained vigilant. They continued to keep accurate records and maintain a calm, respectful demeanor in all interactions with neighbors and the HOA. They knew that vigilance, patience, and integrity were essential to protecting themselves and their family. They also maintained positive relationships with other neighbors, reinforcing their reputation as fair, trustworthy, and considerate members of the community. Through this experience, the family discovered the strength of their bond, the power of preparation, and the importance of responding to challenges with patience and dignity. They had faced an aggressive neighbor who tried to control and intimidate them over minor matters, but their calm, evidence-based approach had turned the situation around. Karen had learned the hard way that the family was not easily intimidated, and the community had seen the family's integrity in action. By the end of this chapter in their lives, the family had grown more confident and resilient. They knew that future challenges might arise, but they were prepared to face them together with courage, calmness, and a strong sense of justice. Karen's attempts to disrupt their lives had only strengthened their unity and resolve, proving that patience, evidence, and dignity were the most powerful tools in overcoming harassment. The family continued to live their lives quietly and respectfully, knowing that they had faced a storm and emerged stronger, ready for whatever might come next. After the HOA meeting, the family could finally feel a sense of relief, though they knew things were not entirely over. Karen had retreated for now, but her presence and previous actions had left a mark on the neighborhood. The family understood that they needed to maintain their calm and integrity, not just for themselves, but also for their children and neighbors. They were determined to live peacefully and show that respect and truth always outweighed aggression and false claims. The first few days after the meeting were quiet. The family focused on their normal routines, repairing small things around the house, gardening, and spending time with the children. They also used this time to review the events, making notes on what had worked in their strategy and what they could do if Karen attempted any further harassment. They agreed to remain proactive but calm, ensuring that their evidence and preparedness would continue to protect them. Karen, however, was not ready to disappear quietly. She attempted to regain control by continuing her complaints in subtle ways, sending emails and messages questioning minor details of the family's property. The family, having learned from the previous months, did not respond hastily. They read each message carefully, documented it, and filed it for future reference. They understood that any emotional reaction could be used against them, and that patience and evidence were their strongest defense. The neighbors, who had observed the previous confrontation at the HOA meeting, began to recognize the family's integrity. Some approached them with kind words, acknowledging the difficult situation they had faced. Others shared that they had once doubted the family because of Karen's rumors but now realized the truth. This gradual shift in neighborhood perception was subtle but significant, and the family appreciated the quiet support. Though they continued to act humbly and respectfully, Karen tried a few more direct actions. She attended a small community gathering, attempting to make comments that would draw attention to the family, but the family remained calm, engaging politely with other neighbors without reacting to her provocations. Their composed behavior spoke louder than words, demonstrating to the community that they were not easily intimidated and that Karen's claims lacked merit. Karen's frustration grew visibly as she saw that her tactics were failing to produce the results she wanted. One afternoon, the father and mother decided to have a family meeting. They included their children, explaining in simple terms how they had handled the situation and what lessons they had learned. They talked about patience, preparation, and the importance of standing up for oneself without resorting to anger or aggression. The children listened attentively, asking questions and expressing relief that the family had managed to maintain their dignity. This moment became an important lesson in resilience and calm leadership, reinforcing the family's unity and strength. The family also focused on positive contributions to the neighborhood. They offered to help with community projects, shared homegrown vegetables with neighbors, and invited other families to small, friendly gatherings. These actions reinforced their reputation as kind, responsible, and community-oriented, contrasting sharply with Karen's aggressive and controlling behavior. Slowly, more neighbors began to distance themselves from Karen's negativity and show support for the family's calm and respectful approach. Despite the progress, the family remained vigilant. They continued to monitor all correspondence and interactions, making sure that any future claims could be addressed quickly and with evidence. They understood that being proactive and organized was essential in maintaining their peace of mind and protecting their reputation. They also emphasized teaching the children about responsibility, honesty, and the importance of standing up for what is right. Karen, realizing that her direct attacks were ineffective, began trying more subtle methods. She whispered to neighbors, suggested small doubts, and attempted to create tension through indirect comments. However, the family's consistent behavior and calm responses left little room for her influence. Over time, her attempts to manipulate perceptions began to fade, and the community increasingly saw her as a figure of unnecessary drama rather than authority. The family's efforts to maintain normalcy and kindness were paying off. The neighborhood started to feel more relaxed, and the children were able to play outside without fear of being targeted. Other families took note of how the family handled conflict and used it as an example of dignity, patience, and strategic thinking. The parents felt proud, knowing that they had not only protected their family but had also set a positive example for the entire community. One evening, the family gathered in the backyard, enjoying a quiet meal together. They reflected on the past months, discussing the challenges they had faced and the lessons they had learned. They recognized the importance of unity, calm reasoning, and careful preparation in overcoming difficult situations. They also acknowledged the value of empathy, kindness, and integrity in building strong relationships with their neighbors. Karen's influence gradually diminished as her credibility waned. She became less vocal in meetings, avoided direct confrontation, and slowly lost her presence as a controlling force in the neighborhood. The family, meanwhile, continued to act with grace, humility, and integrity, never seeking to humiliate her or anyone else. Their focus remained on their children, their home, and their positive contributions to the community. The family also took time to strengthen their personal bonds. They engaged in shared hobbies, spent time outdoors, and nurtured a supportive and loving environment at home. The children grew more confident, understanding that challenges could be faced calmly and with intelligence. The parents reinforced lessons about honesty, patience, and the importance of standing up for oneself respectfully. These values became a foundation for resilience that would guide the family in the future. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood returned to a sense of normalcy. Karen's attempts at disruption became increasingly rare and ineffective. The family's consistent behavior, combined with clear evidence of compliance with all rules, had made it impossible for her to create further tension. The community began to appreciate the family's approach and to value their contributions, recognizing that they had acted with fairness, respect, and intelligence throughout the ordeal. By the end of this chapter, the family had not only protected themselves from harassment, but had also strengthened their unity and resilience. They had learned the importance of patience, evidence-based responses, and maintaining dignity in the face of aggression. The children had observed and absorbed valuable life lessons, understanding that challenges could be overcome through calm reasoning, preparation, and integrity. The family continued to live their lives quietly and respectfully, enjoying their garden, cooking together, and spending weekends outdoors. They were proud of how they had handled a difficult situation and confident that they could face any future challenges with the same patience and strategic approach. Karen's influence had faded, and the neighborhood had recognized the family's integrity, allowing everyone to move forward with a renewed sense of peace and community. Through this experience, the family learned that even in the face of constant harassment, calmness, preparation, and unity could overcome adversity. They discovered the power of patience and evidence, the importance of integrity, and the value of positive contributions to the community. Their bond had grown stronger, their confidence had increased, and they were ready for whatever challenges the future might bring. Life returned to a peaceful rhythm, and the family's resilience became a quiet inspiration for everyone around them.